After the end of the eviction moratorium, some landlords are waiting 6+ months just to have their cases heard in court because the eviction case court backlog is so large. I'm Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News. All right, so I have an interesting topic to be covering today, and it really has to do with all of the nonsense and ridiculous eviction moratoriums that went across the entire country, okay? So obviously there were all the CDC eviction moratoriums, then all the local and state jurisdictions had their own as well, right? And when they tell people, hey, you can't file eviction against these people right now, well, they're putting landlords in a very, very bad situation because sometimes there's just people who we need to get rid of. Okay, whether that person has paid rent or not, sometimes we need our property back. And that is the big problem. So when the eviction moratorium ended across the entire country back in August of 2021, when the Supreme Court threw out the ridiculous CDC eviction moratorium, guess what? A lot of places, they opened their courts back up, and finally things should have been getting back to normal. But unfortunately, because there were so many landlords who had waited so long to be able to file evictions, the courts are backlogged. Okay, and this isn't something that's only taking place in, like, you know, the far left-leaning progressive places where they already had, you know, they're trying to do everything possible to make it hard for landlords to evict. But this is also happening in landlord-friendly places, okay, such as Georgia. And that's where I'm getting this article today. It's actually coming out of the Atlanta area. And it's crazy because you wouldn't think that, hey, in a place like Georgia, you know, which is known to have very strong property rights, you know, strong protections for property owners and landlords, you wouldn't think they'd have this sort of issue, but they do, okay? And that's just unfortunate consequence of having so many cases that had to be filed all at the same time. And yeah, it's nuts. It's nuts. And I hate hearing these stories, but you know, I like to bring it to light, you know, to let people know, hey, things aren't what they seem in all cases, okay? Landlords are still suffering the consequences of these ridiculous eviction moratoriums. You know, like I said, it was unconstitutional from the very beginning. They should have never had them implemented. But, you know, we're going to help these poor people out. And the only thing they really did was hurt property owners and turned us into social service providers and homeless shelters for people who didn't want to pay their rent. Oh, man, it's a bad situation. And, you know, this article is actually just covering part of the situation. But before I get into the article, go ahead, hit the like, subscribe button, maybe leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think, okay? In your local area, is there a backlog of eviction cases because so many cases have been filed since the end of the eviction moratorium? Now, I know this isn't, you know, something that is a problem in every single area. I'm just curious, what other areas, what other parts of the country is this still an issue, okay? Obviously, I've heard that the state of New York and New Jersey have big eviction backlogs. You know, I just covered an interesting story about a landlord who, you know, basically had filed eviction on somebody in like December of 2019 and now finally is getting their, you know, got that person that they had in their unit evicted. And, you know, that's somebody who had filed eviction before all of the lockdowns and pandemic and eviction protections. So, you know, those states are really, really doing bad. And then they're trying to pass new laws to make it even harder, but that's a different story. So anyway, let's get into this article. And it's coming from fox5atlanta.com, and it says, landlord frustrated with court backlogs, missing thousands in rent payments. And it looks like the article actually has a video with it, and I'll play part of that video right now.
Just fix the system. That's all. Get us in, and please get us out.
Aretha Scogan says it's been nearly a year since his tenant has paid rent at this Clayton County property.
In excess of $10,500 is the amount of expenditures that the tenant would have paid for rent at this location that I've lost.
Scogan's filed eviction paperwork with the Clayton County Magistrate Court December of 2021. And over 250 days later, he's still waiting.
But they're running a year behind. And they said that because they're only operating now 3 days per week opposed to previous 5 days, and a shortage of judges.
All right, so you saw the video. Now let's get into this article. Clayton County, Georgia. Aretha Scoggins says it's been nearly a year since his tenant has paid rent at his Clayton County property. But whenever Scoggins calls the court to evict the tenant, he says he's told they are backed up from COVID. Just fix the system, get us in, and please get us out, said Scoggins. He's speaking out now because he believes there are other landlords in similar situations. In excess of $10,000 is the amount of expenditures the tenant would have paid in rent I've lost. And now I have to put more money in to refurbish again, said Scoggins. So in an ideal system, obviously, the eviction process is relatively quick, and he would have been able to get this tenant out of there before the tenant accumulated more debt. Okay, that's the big reason why we want to get through these evictions as quickly as possible, because we know it is very, very unlikely the tenant will be unable or be able to pay back the accumulated rent debt. So if we get him out of there quicker, it's actually better for the tenant. Scoggins filed the eviction paperwork with the Clayton County Magistrate Court December of 2021. Over 250 days later, he's still waiting. They are running a year behind, and they are only operating 3 days a week as opposed to 5 days, and there is a shortage of judges, says Scoggins. Chief Judge Keisha Wright Hill sent a statement supporting the claim that the COVID-19 pandemic created a massive backlog in the court. We have acquired federal funding to hire additional staff to specifically address any backlog due to COVID-19, said Chief Judge Hill. Yeah, so they already were shorthanded, okay? So they're shorthanded to the point where they can only operate 3 days a week. That is bad, right? And then you throw on top of that huge number of eviction cases coming in due to the pandemic, and, it's a nightmare situation. And even with federal funding, it will take a long time to hire new judges, to hire new staff, etc., to help expedite the process. So what's going to happen is this guy's probably going to have to wait a year before his case is heard, take those losses, take additional losses. He's already owed $10,000, it says here, right? And I'm like, come on, man. This is completely messed up, and it should be unlawful. Now, in a situation like his, you know what I would have done, right? And I know a lot of landlords don't like doing this, but have you ever heard of cash for keys? Basically, you go up to the tenant, right? And you're like, hey, listen, I want you out of here, okay? You're not paying rent. I know you don't have anywhere to go, but here's a little bit of money to get you on up out of here, okay? And I would have done this early on rather than this tenant, just leading me on and dragging out the whole thing and then ending up owing me 10 grand, okay? So if you had given them a couple grand at the very beginning, yeah, they would be gone. Yeah, you'd still be out a couple grand, but you wouldn't have paid those lawyer fees to go to eviction court. You wouldn't have lost, $10,000 in lost rent. Basically, it would have ended up cheaper. Now, that is not the ideal way to get rid of a tenant, obviously, right? But in certain situations where eviction is so hard and takes so long, it's actually cheaper to do it that way. We currently hold 3 dispossessory calendars per week to address the cases that do not qualify for funds and require a hearing, she said. The Clayton County Magistrate Court is working diligently to address all landlord-tenant cases in a manner that is both fair and efficient, while also taking important steps to protect the health of the court staff, attorneys, and the public. I love judges, the county. I've been here for over 25 years in Clayton County. I don't plan on going anywhere anytime soon. I just need the support from the court, said Scoggins. The chief judge says they have provided resources to some landlords that qualify for federal help. Now, imagine if this landlord was going through this situation in one of those places where, hey, they provide free attorneys to the tenants, right? And then, not only does the process take an extra long time because of the court backlog, but then you have attorneys filing frivolous motions, etc., trying to extend the whole process to make it even worse, so that the tenant can stay even longer. So in a landlord-friendly state like Georgia, you have a situation actually that is very similar to what happens in California, New York, etc., where the landlords can't have their case heard, and it ends up costing them tens of thousands of dollars in lost rent. And hopefully this is only in this specific county in Georgia, Clayton County, and not throughout the entire state, but who knows? Okay, there's places throughout the entire country where this sort of thing goes on, and it's there's not much that can be done about it. After the whole eviction moratorium nonsense, landlords have been suffering, and it's nice to highlight that, hey, it's not just in these very far left-leaning progressive states. Okay, I've covered other stories that where landlords are getting screwed over in places like Florida and Texas too. We have to watch our backs. That's what I'm trying to say. I'm saying that do not become complacent and think, oh well, we're in a much more conservative state, so therefore we'll be fine. No, it doesn't work that way. The laws, they slowly change, and one day, it's kind of like the story about putting a lobster in a boiling pot of water, and they just try to jump out or crawl out immediately. But if you slowly raise the temperature, they'll just be cooking. It's one of those things where we have to constantly watch these laws, watch these politicians, and fight to make sure that we don't lose our property rights.